Extract from The Mysteries of London by GWM Reynolds, 1845. The gravedigger entered the cemetery and cast a glance around him. That glance well expressed the man's thoughts, for he mentally asked himself, whose grave must I disturb now to make room for the new one? At length he advanced towards a particular spot, considered it for a moment, and then struck his spade into the soil, as much to say, "This will do." He thrust the rod into the ground. It met with a little resistance from some substance a little harder than the soil, but the man pushed it downwards with a strong arm, and it sank at least 12 feet into the ground. Satisfied, the gravedigger drew back the rod, and from the deep but narrow aperture thus formed issued a stench more pestiferous than that which ever came from the lowest knacker's yard. The man retreated rapidly to the bone house. That odour was too powerful even for one who had passed the greater portion of his life in that very graveyard. He now proceeded to light a fire in the bone house, and when he saw the huge logs which he heaped on the grate blazing brightly, he covered them with coke. The current of air from the open door fanned the flames which roared up the chimney, and the gravedigger felt invigorated and cheered by the genial warmth that issued from the ample grate. After lingering for a few minutes in the bone house, the gravedigger returned to the spot which he had previously marked for excavation. Bearing his brawny arms to the very shoulders, he now set himself vigorously to work to dig the grave which was to receive a newcomer that afternoon. Throwing the earth on either side, he digged to a depth of about 2 feet, when his spade encountered a coffin. He immediately took his pickaxe, broke the coffin into pieces, and then separated with his shovel the pieces of wood and the human bones from the damp earth. The coffin was already so soft with decay that the iron rod had penetrated through it without much difficulty, and it therefore required but little exertion to break it up altogether. But the odour which came from the grave was now of the most nauseating kind, fetid, sickly, pestiferous, making the atmosphere heavy and the human breath thick and clammy, as it were, causing even that experienced gravedigger to retch as if he was about to vomit. Leaping from the grave, he began to busy himself in conveying the pieces of the broken coffin and the putrid remains of mortality into the bone house, where he heaped them pell-mell upon the fire. The flesh had not completely decayed all away from the bones. A thick, black, fatty-looking substance still covered those human relics, and the fire was thus fed with a material which made the flames roar and play half up the chimney. And from the summit of that chimney came a smoke thick, dense, and dark, like the smoke of a gasometer or manufactory, but bearing on its sable wing the odour of pestilence. The man returned to the grave, and was about to resume his labour, when his eyes caught sight of a black object, almost embedded in the damp clay heaped up by the side. He turned it over with his spade. It was the upper part of the skull, with the long, dark hair of a woman still remaining attached to it. The gravedigger coolly took up the relic by that long hair, which perhaps had been once a valued ornament, and, carrying it in this manner into the bone house, threw it upon the fire. The hair hissed for a moment as it burnt, for it was damp and clogged with clay. Then the voracious flames licked up the thin coat of blackened flesh which had still remained on the skull, and lastly devoured the bone itself. The gravedigger returned to his toils, and at depth of scarcely 1 foot below the coffin, thus exhumed and burnt, his shovel again was impeded for a moment by another coffin. Once more was the pickaxe put into requisition. A second coffin was broken up, Another decomposing, but not entirely decomposed, corpse was hacked and hewed and rent to pieces by the merciless implement, which was wielded by a merciless arm. And in a few moments the fire in the bone house burnt cheerfully once more, the mouth of the chimney vomiting forth its dense and pest-bearing breath, the volume of which was from time to time lighted with sparks and flakes of fire. Thus was it that this gravedigger disposed of the old tenants of the cemetery in order to make room for new ones.